Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me on another of my interview series. Today, I'm very privileged. I'm going to be talking to Dr. Tess Lawrie, who is from the co-founder, I should say, of the World Council for Health. And you can find them at worldcouncilforhealth.org. Not to be confused with another organisation that we've been talking about who has a similar name. In fact, this lovely lady was an external consultant for them, the WHO, but was never employed by them. Dr. Tess, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Richard. It's really such an honor to be speaking with you today.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. Now, I've got to ask you, because you sound like this big grand organisation, the World Council for Health, have you got a James Bond villain as your head honcho up there? Because that seems to be the prerequisite thing these days.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you.
Thank goodness for that. I'm very pleased to hear it.
Yeah.
So Dr. Tess, or rather Dr. Lawrie, I should say. Tess is obviously your full name. So you were I'll call you Tess. There we go. External consultant for the WHO. Should we just get over that? Because a lot of people may think, oh, anybody who's worked for the WHO, we don't really hold much of a high opinion at the moment of them. I mean, maybe some people do. And so should we just clarify that up? What does that mean when you say you were an external consultant, and what were you doing?
Well, I'm a medical doctor and a researcher, and I developed skills in something called guideline methodology. So I helped the WHO, in particular the Department of Reproductive Health, to develop clinical practice guidelines related to antenatal care and intrapartum care and childbirth. So that was the area I was in, and I've always only worked for non-profit organizations. I have no conflicts of interest. I've never worked for pharma, and the work that I did was very much contract-based for World Health Organizations. So they'd ask me to prepare a systematic review or a guideline, and then I would do the work. I would go to Geneva and present it to panels, and then I would come back and write up the documents and do all the revisions and so on. So that was the sort of work, very much office-based, remote work for the WHO.
So when you were doing that, did you ever get a hint that the WHO had agendas that perhaps were not necessarily, as we seem to be thinking now, very beneficial in terms of health for the population of the world?
Well, I took the work in the first place because I wanted to help people. And I always felt, well, if I was working for the World Health Organization, I would be able to make a difference. But I soon saw that we didn't really seem to be making much of a difference. And there seemed to be a lot of outside influence. So the teams working there are very dependent on grants from organizations such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And so this did concern me. And there was sort of a fair amount of competition to get those grants as well. And yeah, as I say, we did seem to be rather stuck in old paradigms of health, where vaccines are the only solution, and where preventing death is important, rather than a focus on good health, optimizing people's health, encouraging people to take responsibility for their health, and focusing on healthy food and water and all of those sorts of things that really determine health far more than the number of injections you get.
Well, you're certainly talking my language there about healthy food, healthy living, and all of that. I did find that during the pandemic, the response about people being locked inside and not actually encouraging people to eat healthily, to boost their immune system with all sorts of supplements and things like that, and getting outside vitamin D, just very simple things, was quite negligent, I felt, from the government of our country here in England, or Great Britain. And I thought that was a huge opportunity to sort of encourage people to get off things like processed foods and all of that. So you're definitely talking my language and taking responsibility for our health, because that's something I think that people have almost handed over to doctors and hospitals and assumed, well, I'll just live however I like. and then there's a pill that will correct me. So we'll talk a bit about that and all of those sort of things. Tell us about the World Council of Health and what that does and how that came about.
The World Council for Health came about because the COVID strategies were totally not evidence-based. So it became clear that there were early treatments and supplements and immune supporting activities that could have been advised, but they weren't. And it was clear that the rollout of the novel therapies, including injections and pills, were not they were not ready and they were not appropriate. So there wasn't sufficient evidence to support their use. So this is what brought our groups together. And we're a coalition of international organizations. Some are small and some are large, but 193 at the latest count this week. And we cover 49 countries. So these are the countries that are contributing to our work. We have a law and activism committee. We have a health and science committee, a bioethics committee, mind health. And these are volunteer committees drawn from our partner groups and other volunteer experts who come in with the mission to help. And so it really is a grassroots organization. We are funded by the people, by donations, through our website and so on, and our activities, webinars and conferences and such.
So huge amount of knowledge base from around the world without the sort of financial incentive in terms of what you guys get. You're there to do what, the things that most people think that doctors and nurses and the health practitioners all around the world are there to do, is to sort of help people and guide us as well. So that's really interesting. Now, I know that you have a thing on your website about you want to, and it seems to me to be the right thing to do, is to get away from the World Health Authority, and particularly a treaty in which they would have the ability to control all our nations on things like a pandemic response and mandate certain things. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Well, in actual fact, there are two things that are going on at the moment that people are unaware of. The most pressing is the amendment to the international health regulations. So the other is the WHO pandemic treaty or accord or instrument or whatever they choose to call it. So there are these two processes, and they both lead to more or less the same thing. And that is basically all countries handing over sovereignty and power to determine what happens in the event of another health emergency, or potential health emergencies. So I would like to just highlight in particular the amendments to the international health regulations. And the international health regulations were actually put together in 2005 to basically guide an international response in the event of infectious disease that could cross borders and such. And it wasn't legally binding, but what they're driving for is a legally binding document that enables the Director General of the World Health Organization to determine whether something is an actual or potential threat, health emergency of international concern, and then once declared, to determine what countries should do and mandate interventions. And I think I've got a list here of all the things, and I feel that it's important to actually itemize them and read them all.
Please do.
There's 10 really main issues. The one is that the WHO role changes from advisory to mandatory.
Right, and that's scary. Is that not? That's a very scary thing.
I think many people don't realize that even our UK policies were all WHO policies. It was sort of a one-size-fits-all approach. Every country had to follow suit, although they weren't legally bound to do so. So now what is being sought is that it's actually mandatory. It's legally binding, and if you don't go along with it, you have to give a reason for it, and then they can still put boots on the ground.
And that would take away your informed consent. If somebody told you this is a good idea, you could say, actually, no, thank you. It's very nice of you, very kind offer, but I'd rather not. They could say, well, I'm afraid you've got to have it. Come hell or high water.
Well, that is part of it. They can mandate medical treatments.
Right.
So they would then have the authority to tell you you've got to have an examination, and then you've got to give proof that you've taken your prophylaxis, your vaccine, and they can insist that you quarantine and be treated. So, this would all be coming from the outside. And, when you think about all the fuss over Brexit, this is far more, this is, that's why we're saying hashtag Wexit, WHO exit, because really people need to be aware that this is pending, and May is the D-Day. So yes, mandatory medical treatments. Of course, what goes along with that is the global health certificates. So they want to institute a system of global health certificates in digital and paper format, and you've got to have the test certificates, vaccine certificates, prophylaxis certificates, recovery certificates, you name it, and then that goes hand in hand with whether or not you can travel. So, it's really would be a violation of our inalienable rights to travel if we have to subscribe to a global health certificate that is mandated and decided the terms of by anyone, but in particular the World Health Organization in this instance. So the other thing that they would be able to do is they'd determine what the health products were for that health emergency. It might not be a pandemic emergency. It might be a climate change emergency. And then they would determine the allocation of those health products and who gets to develop them, and they would, and countries would be forced to buy them. There would be an obligation to cooperate.
Yes. So the words vested interest wouldn't enter into any of that, would it? Of course.
Of course not.
And favors and backhanders. None of that would, of course, come into that. It seems extremely dangerous.
There's two other points I want to point
Please
out.
do.
So in one of the articles, there's previously in the 2005 document, Article 3, they referred to that they would that actions should be taken with respect for dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedoms of people, and they're seeking to remove this phrase. So that is very worrying. And then the other one that is very, very worrying is censorship. So the World Health Organization would have the capacity to determine what is misinformation and disinformation and what we can hear in relation to our health and health information. So that's just a brief précis, and I didn't want to, forgive me for reading, but I didn't want to leave any of those out.
No, not at all. Tyranny comes to mind if anybody signs this thing, and dictatorship. I mean, we saw the debacle with the current medical treatment that people were cajoled into having, and we've seen that there are harms. I mean, we can't deny there are some harms. So to have an organisation saying one size fits all, and based on our history, we're going to look after you. I think people would be completely mad, would they not?
Yes. Well, I think what I need to point out is that this document doesn't need signing. These amendments do not need signing because it's simply an amendment to an existing agreement from 2005. This document does not need signing. And so...
How is that? I mean, how is that possible? I mean, that's like, okay, well, we've got this idea, we'd like to take over your life and dictate everything to you and pump stuff into you. But and we might amend that at some point, so somebody somewhere has signed it, and that now we would like to actually do all those things. But you don't have to sign, you don't have to agree, it's all done. How is that possible?
Well, this is exactly it, and this is why people find it so difficult to believe,
Yes.
No, that can't possibly be true. But, well, it is true, and it's in May, towards the end of May, that this document will be passed, because they feel they've done all their consultations. They've asked countries for feedback. There was one last year. There was a submission by the United States, which was very draconian and was pushed back. And now it seems like they've included the amendments that have been offered forward, and so the document has been prepared, and pretty much all of those things that were suggested in the first place are still there, including countries have about 24 to 48 hours to agree once the World Health Organization Director General has offered assistance for in the event of a public health emergency of international concern. So, so the countries have to just sort of say, the World Health Organization offers assistance, and then the country has a short time a day to say yes, okay. And if they don't within 48 hours, well, they need to provide a reason for that. So no signature required. It's this adoption is by no signature from country leaders and no Senate or Parliament. It's just a simple majority of whoever's in the meeting.
And can they not? They can, if they rebut it and say we don't want this. How do we stop it? I mean, because
we have to. So this is why I was hoping to speak to you, because we are really encouraging people to take up a campaign in their communities to exit the WHO. Why is the UK even in the WHO? Did you know that the UK contributes around £250 million a year to the WHO? And what on earth is that for? Some of it is it's sort of assessed amount. So every country that's a member of the WHO contributes an assessed amount. And in the UK's case, I think it's 21,000 or 22,000, I think it's $22 million, dollars a year. But then there's a sort of voluntary contribution, which is of a flexible amount and can be influenced. So that is around 300 to $500 million. So I'm getting my thousands and millions mixed up. It shows the scale of our different budgets. So the voluntary contributions that the WHO receives are actually far greater than the assessed contributions, and the voluntary contributions can be influenced. So just to put that clear, there's about 1 million in assessed contributions, which are contributions that a billion countries contribute, but it's 5 billion of voluntary contributions which are influenceable.
Right. So we're sending out this money, which is of course taxpayers' money, because the government, in theory, doesn't have any of its own money, so why are we in it? I mean, and can we leave it? I mean, can we say thank you, we're out? How is that possible?
Yes, we can. Why should we not? I mean, we should be defunding. We shouldn't be paying an organization that's corrupt. If I could just say, of that 5 billion that the WHO gets, 20% of that is from Gavi and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So, from private entities. So the World Health Organization is now an entity that's primarily funded by private entities that can influence its policy. And that's what we're seeing, certainly with the partnerships with private corporations and World Economic Forum and so on. It's being controlled, and it's really focusing everything on this sort of control of government policy and our health and sovereignty. So yes, we can leave it. We have to, but we can't leave it if we don't know it's happening.
No, of course, absolutely.
So what we're trying to do really is get people to realize this is really a very critical issue. The World Health Organization does influence our policy. After May, they will be in a position to, in the event of another pandemic, or a health emergency, to tell us what to do and what injections we need and how safe they can be or not. And it's really, people need to think, have they done a good job this past? And I would suggest not. And I can give you a couple of reasons why. A, they did not follow evidence-based strategies, and their actions have led to harm. And I can support that by telling you that on their Vigi Access database for vaccine adverse events, for the COVID vaccines, there are almost 5 million adverse event reports on their own database, and they have not done a safety audit.
Right.
And they have been absolutely quiet about what is about those data. So
I'm sure they have.
Yeah. So how on earth can we say, you've done such a great job. Yes, we
Yes.
want to hand over all decision making in the next pandemic to you. And in fact, not only in the next pandemic, which you get to declare, but in any public health emergency, Mr. Gates or Mr. Schwab or any of those deem important to their bank balances. So, I would suggest that that we say the WHO has not done a good job, and really look at how we can how we can encourage our politicians and get a groundswell movement going to exit the WHO, defund and exit the WHO. That money that goes to the WHO could much rather be spent on the poor people who are suffering from side effects and harms from these injections.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, the thing is, it's that business about trying to influence MPs and the government. My viewers have been writing to their MPs, and they've been sharing the MPs' responses, and in each one, apart from Andrew Bridgen, who obviously stood up and made people aware of this, the MPs, the letters that I get from my viewers from their MP just spout the same thing. We're very proud of the vaccines. They're all safe and effective. We've done a good job. And you just get the impression that the MPs are just not interested, or they will not address it. How we can therefore go and say we've got to exit the WHO because it's not going to be good for the nation. How do we do that? I mean, I'm obviously appealing to you and my listeners or viewers who might say, crikey, this is we've got so little time to act, but how?
Well, there's two ways of doing this. One can one obviously needs to raise awareness.
Yes.
And politicians need to be elected, and Brexit was a really good angle for people to take. Whichever side the politician was on, they were sure to garner 50% of the population. So similarly with Wexit, it's quite possible that this kind of information would be great for getting yourself elected. Because it's a very, very important issue, possibly the most important issue at the moment for our country's sovereignty and our nation and our individual sovereignty. But the other thing to do is actually just to really laugh at them and say, you must be joking. It's a totally crazy, megalomaniacal idea that this organization that has failed so abysmally, that is headed up by someone of real poor repute and puppeteered by a bunch of crazy megalomaniacs who think we'll all be better with 100 injections in our arms from birth to death. It's laughable. So I think really I wouldn't want people to feel fearful about this information, but rather to feel empowered and just realize we're living in crazy times.
Yes.
And we need to get savvy and empower ourselves to step away from the fear.
Yes. And my fear is that come June the 1st, end of May, they've got it. It's all out. They suddenly say, there's a climate change problem. We really think something's happening, or there is some terrible thing we've discovered another something or other somewhere that's happened, another pandemic of something, or there's aliens coming down and it's going to be ray gunning you, and so you're going to need to have some special protection against this ray, whatever it is. That as soon as they've got that power, I don't know why I think this, maybe because the way they have moved and shaken in the last 3 years, it's just given me this notion that as soon as they've got it, they're going to go full on with something, and then it seems that the governments are going to be absolutely helpless. And what would happen if people said, "Well, I don't want this"? I mean, would the army be deployed, and would people be physically held down whilst they inject you with whatever the World Health Authority organization decided was the right thing to do? And we've no idea what that substance is.
Well, that could well be the case. I mean, they're angling for the means to do that.
Mm.
So what we're really encouraging is for people to realize there's a better way,
Yes.
and a better way is to really start with yourself, taking responsibility for your own health and your family and your community, and starting small and growing that sovereignty. And we have the Better Way principles I wanted to speak to you about as well.
I have got those. I can put them up on the screen. Just bear with me 1 minute. I have to do a funny thing here. Right, let's see if that is. Here we go. So I've got the Better Way Charter.
Yes, so the Better Way Charter came out of last year's Better Way conference. You may or may not be aware of, Richard. In May last year, we held a most wonderful conference in Bath, which was very solutions focused, where we looked at what was happening in science.
Oops.
And
Sorry.
Dealing with consequences of the COVID-19 chapter, how to solve the issues with the media and environmental challenges, and new ways of looking at health. And out of that, we distilled these principles of basically how to get along and cooperate in a new way that's more reflective and more human and less materialistic than the way we've been trained in the last century. So the first principle is we act in honor and do no harm, or we do no harm and we act in honor. We're free beings with free will, so we take responsibility for and control of our lives, our choices, and our health. We're part of nature, so we need the planet to be as well as we are. We are spiritual beings, and we actually thrive when our life has a higher meaning and purpose. We thrive together, so we value our inclusive and very diverse community. We value different perspectives, so we like talking with each other and discussing things in the pub, and because this is how we refine our knowledge, and we can choose to disagree, and choose to differ. And we use technology with discernment, very important. So we recognize that technology needs to be used with respect to human beings and the planet. And most importantly, you left off the footnote there. We do not tolerate, don't worry, you don't need to show it. We do not tolerate the violation of inalienable rights, including freedom to travel, freedom of speech, freedom of bodily autonomy, and to be innocent until proven guilty. And we don't tolerate profit, power, and influence coming before people and the planet. So it's a really simple little charter. And it's how we can really change our ways.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, just you talking through that do no harm. We're free will. We're part of nature. That spirituality is integral part of our well-being. Thriving together, valuing different perspectives, using technology with discernment. Just those 7 things. Who's going to disagree with that? And why is the WHO not set up for that? I mean,
exactly.
This is the thing that gets me. And of course, your footnote, which is so important, that we do not tolerate the violation of people's inalienable rights and freedoms, which that should be just taken for granted, surely. And profit, power, and influence coming. We don't tolerate profit, power, and influence coming from before the well-being of people of the planet. I mean, it just makes total sense. I can't see anybody would want to disagree with that unless they were psychopathic and just wanted greed, work for greed and money and control of other people, which may or may not be the case elsewhere. He says, well, Richard, diplomatically.
I can attest to the fact that it does seem to resonate very widely, because I've recently traveled to Malaysia and the Philippines, and I've met Chinese people, I've met people who follow the Tao, I've met people who are Islamic, I've met devout Catholics and Christians. And it seems that those principles seem to be very cross-cutting.
Right.
They really resonate with people from all different backgrounds, and they are a point of unity. So our aim at World Council for Health is to unite people through these 7 principles, this basic charter of how to get along in the world in a better way. But recognizing that everybody's different and autonomous. So not trying to make everybody the same, but just saying, look, hey guys, how about this? This simple 7 principles that we can all just get along. And just to highlight that at World Council for Health, we're not trying to be a new World Health Organization. The time for those sorts of monolithic organizations is totally over. Those centralized structures. What we are doing is we are decentralizing, and we would like to see the decentralization of responsibility and control of health from a centralized system to a totally decentralized system where countries take responsibility for their own health policies and practices, including traditional practices, which have almost been wiped out by Big Pharma. We would like to see those countries then sharing and decentralizing responsibility for health to their communities and ultimately to the individuals, so that everybody can basically be their own councils for health and be able to make up their own minds and their own choices with regard to health and their lives. So that is our aim, and I hope you will agree that it's
I totally agree. I mean, it speaks to how any sort of treatment with a doctor, if you go to the doctor, it should be personalised treatment, bespoke to you. That the idea that a treatment, whatever it is, or one piece of advice is going to fit everybody in the world at the same time, and irrespective of how they live, their culture of how they live, what they understand, that even down to the geology of the landscape and all of that, that somebody somewhere would sit in an office and say, no, this is the one thing, and that each individual country, even in a village, where the village doctor might say, well, they might do that, but we've found our water is a lot clearer and purer than the stuff that comes out of the tap. I recommend, to give people that autonomy back has got to be the way forward. And I think we've proved that the top down, whilst it might have, in theory, a good idea, but in practice, I think it absolutely is disastrous.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I do totally agree with it. So people can find out more about the World Health Organization, obviously. That's not the one I wanted to mention. The World Council for Health at your website, which I'll put in there and in the description. They can find out the Better Way Charter and have a look. What do you want people to do? I mean, we've spoken about exit the WHO and put pressure on to MPs, form groups, just get talking about it and make a noise, I suppose. Like in so many of these things, it's making a noise so that the MPs and the government are aware of our distrust of this rather nasty sounding treaty that's coming along. Is there anything else that we can do?
Well, yeah, I think, as you say, Meg, we need to just spreading the word. Exit the WHO, it'll be good for you. That is,
and you've got. I mean, on your website.
Or exit the WHO. It's not good for you. It's certainly not good for us.
Let me see if I can just find, because I put it up here.
Thanks very much.
Here we go. So people could tweet this out on their Twitter things, or put it if they do YouTube videos, and they want to talk about it, or put it on their Facebook or any of their stuff. Absolutely. I don't know if I can I manipulate?
If you can scroll it up, then I think one can get the full picture.
Yeah,
but the other thing is, the right thing to do. I think it's really important that people start to lighten up a little bit. We're in the most terrible times and terrible things are happening. So let's just really focus on a better way and how we can all be better on our day-to-day interactions with people, reconnect, hugs, smiles, getting together and really talking about how we can make a better world.
Raising the spirit. Because the one thing that often doesn't get spoken about is the spirituality of us as people, our mindset, our positivity, and all that, because we're being crushed all the time by lots of things, not just these sort of areas, but people inability to pay bills, relationship problems, kids coming back from school, perhaps having issues wherever it is. And we're just, having to firefight left, right and centre. And when you've got these other big issues coming down, it's very easy to sort of end up in that downward spiral. And raising one's spirit and having a laugh at these, particularly at these people who sort of dress up like Bond villains and things, and give the impression that they want to take over the world. And actually, and I think that power is often thought, well, if we just laugh at them, they're going to do it anyway. But it's more than that, isn't it?
It is, and also getting out into nature. I just wanted to say we really need to, if in doubt, go out into nature and just take your shoes off. But it certainly is more than that. What we have is this amazing opportunity for change. So, the Klaus Schwabs of this world have, the Great Reset, and they're, we're hackable animals, and, all sorts of nasty chips and things are planned. But on the other hand, now that we see them and we see, how ridiculous it all is, it's the opportunity for a great reset. It's really an opportunity to set ourselves free. And I can just say when Dr. Homer Lim of the Philippine Council for Health, because they're our first country council, when he was talking about the charter, he was saying, it's just so simple, because who wouldn't agree with it? It's just about being free.
Yeah.
And so I think if we can get people realizing that we live in captivity, and we now, the cage door is open. We actually can set ourselves free. So let's do it.
Well, I admire your positivity, Tess. I think that's absolutely brilliant, and I hope that people will take that away. They'll make a noise about what the WHO are trying to do, persuade the members of Parliament that we don't need it, because we have a better way. It's better for all of us, including the MPs and government, because if they embrace it, it just seems to me that people will love them again, rather than mistrust them, which is what we have been since Brexit. All the sort of backhanders and terrible things going on. And I'm sure ultimately MPs sitting there behind their desks talking to their constituencies would much rather have them saying, thank you for letting us have a free country, thank you for embracing things like the Better Way Charter, rather than having to deal with all the hate and hatred that will come if the people like the WHO get their way. So it's a win-win for everyone.
Yes, yeah.
So, Tess, thank you so much for coming on and telling us about it. I will send my viewers off immediately to go and have a look and explore more, and go and start making a noise, which is brilliant. I really appreciate the time. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Richard.
So there we are, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for watching. A big thanks to Dr. Tess Lawrie. And do check out the link. It'll be in the description. I'll be back with more interviews coming up soon. Until then, from us both, goodbye.